Section 16, Letters 76 to 80. Letter the 76th, the Vicomte de Valmont to the Marquise de Merteuil. Note: this letter has not been recovered.
Either your letter is a piece of banter which I have not understood, or you were in a dangerous delirium when you wrote it. If I knew you less well, my lovely friend, I should truly be most alarmed. And whatever you may say, I do not take alarm too easily. It is in vain that I read and re-read your letter. I am none the more advanced, for to take it in the natural sense which it presents is out of the question. What was it then you wished to say? Is it merely that it was useless to take so much trouble with an enemy who was so little to be feared? In that case you might be wrong. Prévan is really attractive. He is more so than you believe. He has, above all, the most useful talent of interesting people greatly in his love, by the skill with which he will bring it up in society, and before the company, by making use of the first conversation which occurs. There are few women who do not fall into the trap, and reply to him, because, all having pretensions to subtlety, none wishes to lose an opportunity of displaying it. Now, you are well aware that the woman who consents to talk of love soon finishes by feeling it, or at least by behaving as if she did. He gains again at this method, which he has really brought to perfection, in that he can often call the women themselves in testimony of their defeat. And this I tell you as one who has seen it. I was never in the secret except at second hand, for I have never been intimate with Prévan. But, in a word, there were 6 of us, and the Comtesse de P., thinking herself very artful all the time, and having the air, indeed, to any one who was not initiated, of conversing in the abstract, told us with the utmost detail both how she had succumbed to Prévan, and all that had passed between them. She told this narrative with such a sense of security that she was not even disturbed by a smile which came over all our 6 faces at the same time. And I shall always remember that one of us having sought, by way of excuse, to feign a doubt as to what she said, or rather of what she had the air of saying, she answered gravely that we were certainly none of us so well informed as she was, and she was not afraid even to address herself to Prévan, and ask him if she had said a word which was not true. I was right then in believing this man dangerous to everybody. But for you, Marquise, was it not enough that he was handsome, very handsome, as you tell me yourself, or that he should make one of those attacks on you which you sometimes amuse yourself by rewarding, for no other reason than that you find them well contrived, or that you should have found it amusing to succumb for any reason whatever? Or what do I know? Can I divine the 1,001 caprices which govern a woman's head, and in which alone you continue to take after your sex? Now that you are forewarned of the danger, I have no doubt that you will easily avoid it, but it was none the less necessary to forewarn you. I return to my text, therefore. What did you mean to say? If it is only a piece of banter against Prévan, apart from its being very long, it was of no use addressed to me. It is in society that he must suffer some excellent piece of ridicule, and I renew my prayer to you on this subject. I think I hold the key to the enigma. Your letter is a prophecy, not of what he will do, but of what he will think you ready to do at the moment of the fall which you have prepared for him. I quite approve of this plan. It requires, however, great precautions. You know as well as I do that, as far as the public is concerned, to have a man, or to receive his attentions, is absolutely the same thing, unless the man be a fool, which Prévan is very far from being. If he can gain the appearances, he will boast, and all will have been said. Fools will believe him, the malicious will have the air of believing. Where will your resources be? Remember, I am afraid. It is not that I doubt your skill, but it is the good swimmers who get drowned. I hold myself to be no duller than another. As for means of dishonouring a woman, I have found 100, I have found 1,000, but when I have busied myself to seek how the woman could escape, I have never seen the possibility. You yourself, my fair friend, whose conduct is a masterpiece, I have 100 times found you to have had more good luck than you have shown skill. But after all, I am perhaps seeking for a reason where none exists. I am amazed, however, to think that for the last hour I should have been treating seriously what is surely a mere jest on your part. You intend to make fun of me. Well, so be it. But make haste and let us speak of something else. Something else. I am mistaken. It is always the same. Always women to have or to ruin, and often both. I have here, as you remark, the wherewithal to exercise myself in both kinds, but not with equal ease. I foresee that vengeance will go quicker than love. The little Volanges has succumbed, I answer for that. She only awaits an opportunity, and I undertake to bring it about. But it is not the same with Madame de Tourvel. This woman is disheartening. I did not conceive it of her. I have 100 proofs of her love, but I have 1,000 of her resistance, and in truth I am afraid lest she escape me. The first effect which my return produced gave me more hope. You will guess that I wished to judge for myself, and to make sure of seeing the first emotions, I sent no one ahead to announce me, and I calculated my stages so as to arrive when they should be at table. In fact, I dropped from the clouds, like a divinity at the opera, who comes to effect a dénouement. Having made enough noise at my entry to attract all eyes to me, I could see in one glance the joy of my old aunt, the annoyance of Madame de Volanges, and the confused pleasure of her daughter. My fair one, owing to the seat she occupied, had her back turned to the door. Busy at the moment in carving something, she did not even turn her head. But I said a word to Madame de Rosemonde, and at the first sound, the sensitive Puritan, recognizing my voice, uttered a cry in which I thought I distinguished more love than terror or surprise. I was then in a position to see her face, the tumult of her soul, the struggle between her ideas and sentiments, were depicted on it in a score of different fashions. I sat down to table by her side. She did not know precisely anything of what she did or said. She endeavoured to go on eating. It was out of the question. Finally, not a quarter of an hour later, her pleasure and confusion becoming too strong for her, she could devise nothing better than to ask permission to leave the table, and she escaped into the park on the pretext that she needed to take the air. Madame de Volanges wanted to accompany her. The tender prude would not permit it, too happy, no doubt, to have a pretext for being alone, and to give way without constraint to the soft emotion of her heart. I made the dinner as short as it was possible to do. Dessert was hardly served when the infernal Volanges woman, pressed apparently by her need to injure me, rose from her seat to go and find the charming invalid. But I had foreseen this project, and I thwarted it. I feigned therefore to take this particular movement for the general signal, and having risen at the same time, the little Volanges and the curé of the place followed the double example, so that Madame de Rosemonde was left alone at the table with the old commandant de thé, and they also both decided to leave. We all went then to rejoin my fair one, whom we found in the grove near the château. As it was solitude she wanted, and not a walk, she was just as pleased to return with us as to make us stay with her. As soon as I was certain that Madame de Volanges would have no opportunity to speak apart with her, I thought of fulfilling your orders, and busied myself about the interests of your pupil. Immediately after coffee I went up to my room, and went into the others also, to explore the territory. I took measures to ensure the little girl's correspondence. After this first piece of benevolence, I wrote a word of instruction to her, and to beg for her confidence, and I added my note to the letter from Danceny. I returned to the salon. I found my beauty reclining on a long chair, in an attitude of delicious unconstraint. This spectacle, whilst exciting my desires, illumined my gaze. I felt that this must be tender and beseeching, and I placed myself in such a position that I could bring it into play. Its first effect was to cause the big modest eyes of the heavenly prude to be cast down. For some time I considered that angelic face. Then, glancing over all her person, I amused myself by divining forms and contours through the light clothing, which I could have wished away. After having descended from head to feet, I returned from feet to head. My fair friend, her soft gaze was fixed upon me. It was immediately lowered, but wishing to promote its return, I averted my eyes. Then was established between us that tacit convention, a first treaty of bashful love, which, in order to satisfy the reciprocal need of seeing, allows the looks to succeed one another, until the moment comes when they are mingled. Convinced that this new pleasure occupied my fair one completely, I charged myself with the task of watching over our common safety. But having assured myself that conversation was brisk enough to save us from the notice of the company, I sought to obtain from her eyes that they should frankly speak their language. For this I began by surprising certain glances, but with so much reserve that modesty could not take alarm. And to put the bashful creature more at her ease, I appeared to be as embarrassed as herself. Little by little, our eyes, grown accustomed to encounter, were fixed for a longer interval, until at last they quitted each other no more, and I saw in hers that sweet languor which is the happy signal of love and desire. But it was only for a moment. Soon recovering herself, she changed, not without a certain shame, her attitude and her look. Being unwilling that she should suspect that I had observed her different movements, I rose with vivacity, asking her with an air of alarm if she were unwell. At once everybody rushed around her. I let them all pass in front of me, and as the little Volanges, who was working at her tapestry near a window, needed some time before she could leave her task, I seized the moment to deliver Danceny*s letter. I was at a little distance from her. I threw the letter into her lap. In truth, she did not know what to do. You would have laughed overmuch at her air of surprise and embarrassment. However, I did not laugh, for I feared lest so much clumsiness might betray us. But a quick glance and gesture, strongly accentuated, gave her to understand at last that she was to put the packet in her pocket. The rest of the day contained nothing of interest. What has passed since will, perhaps, bring about events with which you will be pleased, at any rate in so far as your pupil is concerned. But it is better to employ one's time in carrying out one's projects than in describing them. This is, moreover, the 8th sheet I have written, and I am wearied. And so adieu. You will rightly suppose, without my telling it you, that the child has replied to Danceny. I have also had a reply from my fair, to whom I wrote on the morrow of my arrival. I send you the 2 letters. You will or you will not read them. For this incessant, tedious repetition, which already is none too amusing to me, must be insipid indeed to any person not concerned. Once more adieu. I am ever mightily fond of you, but I beg you, if you write to me of Prévan, do so in such a manner that I may understand you. At the Château de 17th September, 17...
Letter the 77th. The Vicomte de Valmont to the Présidente de Tourvel.
Whence, madame, can arise the cruel pains which you are at to shun me? How can it be that the most tender zeal on my part meets on yours only with the treatment which one would barely permit oneself with the man against whom one had the greatest cause to complain? What? Love calls me back to your feet, and when a happy chance places me at your side, you prefer to feign indisposition, to alarm your friends, rather than consent to remain near me. How many times yesterday did you not turn away your eyes to deprive me of the favour of a glance? And if for one single moment I was able to see less severity there, that moment was so short that it seemed as though you wished less to have me enjoy it than to make me feel what I should lose by being deprived of it. That is not, I venture to say, either the treatment which love deserves, or that which friendship may be allowed. and yet of these two sentiments you know whether the one does not animate me, and the other I was, it seems to me, authorized to believe that you did not withhold. This precious friendship, of which you doubtless thought me worthy, since you were kind enough to offer it me, what have I done that I should lose it since? Could I have damaged myself by my confidence? And will you punish me for my frankness? At least have you no fear lest you abuse the one and the other? In effect, was it not to the bosom of my friend that I entrusted the secret of my heart? Was it not face to face with her alone that I thought myself obliged to refuse conditions which I had only to accept in order to obtain the facility for leaving them unfulfilled, and perhaps of abusing them to my advantage? Would you, in short, by a rigour so undeserved, force me to believe that I had needed but to deceive you, in order to obtain greater indulgence? I do not repent of a conduct which I owed you, as I owed it to myself. But by what fatality does each praiseworthy action of mine become the signal for a fresh misfortune? It was after giving occasion for the only praise you have ever yet deigned to accord my conduct that I had to groan for the first time over the misfortune of having displeased you. It was after proving my perfect submission by depriving myself of the happiness of seeing you, simply to reassure your delicacy, that you wished to break off all correspondence with me, to rob me of that feeble compensation for a sacrifice which you had required, and to take from me even the very love which alone had given you the right to ask it. It is, in short, after having spoken to you with a sincerity which even the interest of that love could not abate, that you shun me to-day, like some dangerous seducer, whose perfidy you have found out. Will you then never grow weary of being unjust? At least tell me what new wrongs can have urged you to such severity, and do not refuse to dictate to me the orders which you wish me to obey. When I pledge myself to fulfil them, is it too great a pretension to ask that I may know them? At the Château de 15th September, 17.
Letter the 78th. The Présidente de Tourvel to the Vicomte de Valmont.
You seem surprised at my behaviour, monsieur, and within an ace of asking me to account to you for it, as though you had the right to blame it. I confess that I should have thought it was rather I who was authorized to be astonished and to complain. But since the refusal contained in your last letter, I have adopted the course of wrapping myself in an indifference which affords no grounds for remarks or reproaches. However, as you ask me for enlightenment, and I, thanks be to heaven, am conscious of naught within me which should prevent my granting your request, I am quite willing to enter once more into an explanation with you. Any one reading your letters would believe me to be fantastic or unjust. I think it is not in my deserts that any one should have this opinion of me. It seems to me, above all, that you, less than any other, have cause to form it. Doubtless you felt that, in requiring my justification, you forced me to recall all that has passed between us. Apparently you thought you had only to gain by this examination, as I, on my side, believe I have nothing to lose by it, at least in your eyes. I do not fear to undertake it. Perhaps it is indeed the only means of discovering which of us has the right to complain of the other. To start, monsieur, from the day of your arrival in this château, you will admit, I suppose, that your reputation at least authorized me to employ a certain reserve with you, and that I might have confined myself to the bare expression of the coldest politeness, without fearing to be taxed with excessive prudery. You yourself would have treated me with indulgence, and would have thought it natural that a woman so little formed should not have the necessary merits to appreciate yours. That surely had been the part of prudence, and it would have cost me the less to follow in that, I will not conceal from you, when Madame de Rosemonde informed me of your arrival, I had need to remind myself of my friendship for her, and of her own for you, not to betray how greatly this news annoyed me. I admit willingly that you showed yourself at first under a more favourable aspect than I had imagined, but you will agree, in your turn, that it lasted but a little while, and you were soon tired of a constraint for which, apparently, you did not find yourself sufficiently compensated by the advantageous notion it had given me of you. It was then that, abusing my good faith, my feeling of security, you were not afraid to pester me with a sentiment by which you could not doubt but that I should be offended. And I, whilst you were occupied in aggravating your errors by repeating them, sought a reason for forgetting them, by offering you the opportunity of, at least in part, retrieving them. My request was so just that you yourself thought you ought not to refuse it, but making a right out of my indulgence, you profited by it to ask for a permission which, without a doubt, I ought not to have granted you, and which, however, you obtained. Conditions were attached to it. You have kept no one of them, and your correspondence has been of such a kind that each one of your letters made it my duty not to reply to you. It was at the very moment when your obstinacy was forcing me to send you away from me, that by perhaps culpable condescension I attempted the only means which could permit me to be concerned with you. But what value has virtuous sentiment in your eyes? Friendship you despise, and in your mad intoxication, counting shame and misery for naught, you seek only for pleasures and for victims. As frivolous in your proceedings as inconsequent in your reproaches, you forget your promises, or rather you make a jest of violating them, and after consenting to go away from me, you return here without being recalled, without thought for my prayers or my arguments, without even having the consideration to inform me. You are not afraid to expose me to a surprise whose effect, though assuredly very simple, might have been interpreted to my detriment by the persons who surround us. Far from seeking to distract from or to dissipate the moment of embarrassment you had occasioned, you seem to have given all your pains to increase it. At table you choose your seat precisely at the side of my own. A slight indisposition forces me to leave before the others, and instead of respecting my solitude, you contrive that all the company should come to trouble it. On my return to the drawing-room, I cannot make a step but I find you at my side. If I say a word, it is always you who reply to me. The most indifferent remark serves you for a pretext to bring up a conversation which I refuse to hear, which might even compromise me. For, in short, monsieur, whatever the address you may bring to bear, I think that what I understand may also be understood by the others. Forced thus to take refuge in immobility and silence, you none the less continue to persecute me. I cannot raise my eyes without encountering yours. I am incessantly compelled to avert my gaze, and by an incomprehensible inconsequence you draw upon me the eyes of the company at a moment when I would have even wished it possible to escape from my own. And you complain of my behaviour, and you are surprised at my eagerness to avoid you. Ah, blame rather my indulgence. Be surprised that I did not leave at the moment of your arrival. I ought, perhaps, to have done so, and you will compel me to this violent but necessary course, if you do not finally cease your offensive pursuit. No, I do not forget, I never shall forget what I owe to myself, what I owe to the ties I have formed, which I respect and cherish, and I pray you to believe that, if ever I found myself reduced to the unhappy choice of sacrificing them or of sacrificing myself, I should not hesitate an instant. Adieu, monsieur. At the Château de 16th September, 17 blank.
Letter the 79th. The Vicomte de Valmont to the Marquise de Merteuil.
I intended to go hunting this morning, but the weather was detestable. All that I have to read is a new romance which would bore even a schoolgirl. It will be 2 hours at the earliest before we breakfast, so that in spite of my long letter of yesterday, I will have another talk with you. I am very certain not to weary you, for I shall tell you of the handsome Prévan. How was it you never heard of his famous adventure, the one which separated the inseparables? I wager that you will recall it at the first word. Here it is, however, since you desire it. You will remember that all Paris marvelled that 3 women, all 3 pretty, all 3 with like qualities, and able to make the same pretensions, should remain intimately allied amongst themselves, ever since the moment of their entry into the world. At first, one seemed to find the reason in their extreme shyness, but soon, surrounded as they were by a numerous court whose homages they shared, and enlightened as to their value by the eagerness and zeal of which they were the objects, their union only became the firmer, and one would have said that the triumph of one was always that of the 2 others. One hoped at least that the moment of love would lead to a certain rivalry. Our rakes disputed the honour of being the apple of discord, and I myself should have entered their ranks, had the great consideration in which the Comtesse de was held at the time permitted me to be unfaithful to her before I had obtained the favours I demanded. However, our 3 beauties, during the same carnival, made their choice, as though in concert, and far from this exciting the storms which had been predicted, it only rendered their friendship more interesting by the charm of the confidences entailed. The crowd of unhappy suitors was added, then, to that of jealous women, and such scandalous constancy was held up to public censure. Some pretended that in this society of inseparables, so it was dubbed at that time, the fundamental law was the community of goods, and that love itself was included therein. Others asserted that if the 3 lovers were exempt from rivals of their own sex, they were not from those of the other. People went so far as to say that they had but been admitted for decency's sake, and had obtained only a title without an office. These rumours, true or false, had not the effect which one would have predicted. The 3 couples, on the contrary, felt that they were lost if they separated at such a moment. They decided to set their heads against the storm. The public, which tires of everything, soon tired of an ineffectual satire. Borne on the wings of its natural levity, it busied itself with other objects. Then, casting back to that one with its habitual inconsequence, its criticism was converted into praise. As all things go by fashion here, the enthusiasm gained. It has become a real delirium, when Prévan undertook to verify these prodigies, and settle the public opinion about them, as well as his own. He sought out, therefore, these models of perfection. He was easily admitted into their society, and drew a favourable omen from this. He was well aware that happy persons are not so easy of access. He soon saw, in fact, that this so vaunted happiness was, like that of kings, rather to be envied than desired. He remarked that amongst these pretended inseparables they were beginning to seek for pleasures abroad, and even to occupy themselves with distractions, and he concluded therefrom that the bonds of love or friendship were already loosened or broken, and that those of self-conceit and custom alone retained some strength. The women, however, whose need brought them together, kept up amongst themselves an appearance of the same intimacy. But the men, who were freer in their proceedings, discovered duties to fulfil, or affairs to carry on. They still complained of these, but no longer neglected them, and the evenings were rarely complete. This conduct on their part was profitable to the assiduous Prévan, who, being naturally placed beside the deserted one of the day, found a means of offering alternately, and according to circumstances, the same homage to each of the three friends. He could easily perceive that to make a choice between them was to lose everything. That false shame at proving the first to be unfaithful would make the preferred one afraid. That the wounded vanity of the two others would render them the enemies of the new lover, and that they would not fail to oppose him with the severity of their high principles. In short, that jealousy would surely revive the zeal of a rival who might be still to fear. Everything would be an obstacle. In his triple project, all became easy. Each woman was indulgent because she was interested in it. Each man because he thought that he was not. Prévan, who had at that time but one woman to sacrifice, was lucky enough to see her become a celebrity. Her quality of foreigner, and the homage of a great prince, adroitly refused, had fixed on her the eyes of the court and the town. Her lover participated in the honour, and profited from it with his new mistresses. The only difficulty was to conduct his three intrigues at an equal pace. Their progress had of course to be regulated by that of the one which lagged the most. In fact, I heard from one of his confidants that his greatest difficulty was to hold in hand one which was ripe for gathering nearly a fortnight before the rest. At last the great day arrived. Prévan, who had obtained the three avowals, was already master of the situation, and arranged it as you will see. Of the three husbands, one was absent, the other was leaving the next day at daybreak, the third was in town. The inseparable friends were to sup at the future widow's, but the new master had permitted the former gallants to be invited there. On the morning of that very day he divided the letters of his fair into 3 lots. He enclosed in one the portrait which he had received from her, in the second an amorous device which she had painted herself, in the third a tress of her hair. Each of the friends received this third of a sacrifice as the whole, and consented in return to send to her disgraced lover a signal letter of rupture. This was much, but it was not enough. She whose husband was in town could only dispose of the day. It was arranged that a pretended indisposition should dispense her from going to supper with her friend, and that the evening should be given entirely to Prévan. The night was granted by her whose husband was absent, and daybreak, the moment of the departure of the third spouse, was appointed by the last for the shepherd's hour. Prévan, who neglected nothing, next hastened to the fair foreigner, brought there and aroused the humour which he required, and only left after having brought about a quarrel which assured him 24 hours of liberty. His dispositions thus made, he returned home, intending to take some hours' repose. Other business was awaiting him. The letters of rupture had brought a flash of light to the disgraced lovers. None of them had any doubt but that he had been sacrificed to Prévan, and spite at being tricked, uniting with the ill humour which is almost always engendered by the petty humiliation of being deserted. All three, without communicating with one another, but as though in concert, resolved to have satisfaction, and took the course of demanding it from their fortunate rival. The latter found the 3 challenges awaiting him. He accepted them loyally, but not wishing to sacrifice either his pleasures or the glamour of his adventure, he fixed the rendezvous for the following morning, and gave all 3 assignations at the same place and the same hour. It was at one of the gates of the Bois de Boulogne. When evening came, he ran his triple course with equal success. At least, he boasted subsequently that each one of his new mistresses had received 3 times the wage and declaration of his love. In this, as you may imagine, proofs are lacking to history. All that the impartial historian can do is to point out to the incredulous reader that vanity and exalted imagination can beget prodigies. Nay, more, that the morning which was to follow so brilliant a night seemed to promise a dispensation from all concern for the future. Be that as it may, the facts which follow are more authentic. Prévan repaired punctually to the rendezvous which he had selected. He found there his 3 rivals, somewhat surprised at meeting, and each of them perhaps a trifle consoled at the sight of his companions in misfortune. He accosted them with a blunt but affable air, and used this language to them. It has been faithfully reported to me. "Gentlemen," said he, "as I find you all here together, you have doubtless divined that you have all 3 the same cause of complaint against me. I am ready to give you satisfaction. Let chance decide between you which of the 3 shall first attempt a vengeance to which you have all an equal right. I have brought with me neither second nor witnesses. I did not include any in my offence. I seek none in my reparation." Then, agreeable to his character as a gamester, he added, "I know one rarely holds in 3 hands running, but whatever fortune may befall me, one has always lived long enough, when one has had time to win the love of women and the esteem of men." Whilst his astonished adversaries looked at one another in silence, and their delicacy perhaps reflected that this triple contest rendered the game hardly fair. Prévan resumed: "I do not hide from you that the night which I have just passed has cruelly fatigued me. It would be generous of you to permit me to recruit my strength. I have given orders for a breakfast to be served on the ground. Do me the honour to partake of it. Let us breakfast together, and above all, let us breakfast gaily. One can fight for such trifles, but they ought not, I think, to spoil our good humour." The breakfast was accepted. Never, it is said, was Prévan more amiable. He was skilled enough to avoid humiliating any one of his rivals, to persuade them that they would have easily had a like success, and above all, to make them admit that no more than he would they have let the occasion slip. These facts once admitted, everything arranged itself. The breakfast was not finished before they had repeated a dozen times that such women did not deserve that men of honour should fight for them. This idea promoted cordiality. It was so well fortified by wine that a few moments later it was not enough merely to bear no more ill will. They swore an unreserved friendship. Prévan, who doubtless liked this dénouement as well as the other, would not for that, however, lose any of his celebrity. In consequence, adroitly adapting his plans to circumstances. "In truth," he said to the three victims, "it is not on me but on your faithless mistresses that you should take revenge. I offer you the opportunity. I begin to feel already, like yourselves, an injury which would soon be my share. For if none of you could succeed in retaining a single one, how can I hope to retain all three? Your quarrel becomes my own. Accept a supper this evening at my petite maison, and I hope our vengeance may not be long postponed." They wished to make him explain, but with that tone of superiority which the circumstances authorized him to adopt, he answered, "Gentlemen, I think I have proved to you that my conduct is founded on a certain wit. Trust in me." All consented, and after having embraced their new friend, they separated till the evening to await the issue of his promises. Prévan returns to Paris without wasting time, and goes, according to the usage, to visit his new conquests. He obtained a promise from each to come the same evening and sup at his pleasure house. Two of them raised a few objections, but what can one refuse on the day after? He fixed the rendezvous for a late hour, time being necessary for his plans. After these preparations he retired, sent word to the other three conspirators, and all four went gaily to await their victims. The first is heard arriving. Prévan comes forward alone, receives her with an air of alacrity, conducts her into the sanctuary of which she believed herself to be the divinity. Then, disappearing under some slight pretext, he allows himself to be forthwith replaced by the outraged lover. You may guess how the confusion of a woman who had not yet the habit of adventures rendered triumph easy. Any reproach not made was counted for a grace. and the truant slave, once more handed over to her former master, was only too happy to be able to hope for pardon by resuming her former chain. The treaty of peace was ratified in a more solitary place, and the empty stage was successively filled by the other actors in almost the same fashion, and always with the same result. Each of the women, however, still thought herself alone to be in question. Their astonishment and embarrassment increased when at supper time the three couples were united. But confusion reached its height when Prévan, reappearing in their midst, had the cruelty to make his excuses to the three faithless ones, which, by revealing their secret, told them completely to what a point they had been fooled. However, they went to table, and soon afterwards countenances cleared. The men gave themselves up, the women submitted. All had hatred in their hearts, but the conversation was none the less tender. Gaiety aroused desire, which in its turn lent to gaiety fresh charm. This astounding orgy lasted until morning, and when they had separated, the women had thought to be pardoned, but the men, who had retained their resentment, made on the following morning a rupture which was never healed. And not content with leaving their fickle mistresses, they sealed their vengeance by making their adventure public. Since that time one has gone into a convent, and the other two languish in exile on their estates. That is the story of Prévan. It is for you to say whether you wish to add to his glory, and tie yourself to his car of triumph. Your letter has really given me some anxiety, and I await impatiently a more prudent and clearer reply to the last I wrote you. Adieu, my fair friend. Distrust those queer or amusing ideas which too easily seduce you. Remember that in the career which you are leading, wit alone does not suffice. One single imprudence becomes an irremediable ill. In short, allow a prudent friendship to be sometimes the guide of your pleasures. Adieu. I love you nevertheless, just as much as though you were reasonable. At the Château de 18th September, 17.
Letter the 80th. The Chevalier d'Ancenis to Cécile Volanges.
Cécile, my dear Cécile, when will the time come for us to meet again? How shall I learn to live afar from you? Who will give me the courage and the strength? Never, never shall I be able to support this fatal absence. Each day adds to my unhappiness, and there's no term to look forward to. Valmont, who had promised me help and consolation, Valmont neglects, and perhaps forgets me. He is near the object of his love. He forgets what one feels when one is parted from it. When forwarding your last letter to me, he did not write to me. It is he, however, who should tell me when and by what means I shall be able to see you. Has he nothing then to tell me? You yourself do not speak of it to me. Could it be that you do not participate in my desire? Cécile, Cécile, I am very unhappy. I love you more than ever, but this love which makes the charm of my life becomes its torture. No, I can no longer live thus. I must see you. I must, were it only for a moment. When I rise, I say to myself, I shall not see her. I lie down, saying, I have not seen her. The long, long days contain no moment of happiness. All is privation, regret, despair, and all these ills come to me from the source whence I expected every pleasure. Add to these mortal pains my anxiety about yours, and you will have an idea of my situation. I think of you uninterruptedly, and never without dismay. If I see you afflicted, unhappy, I suffer for all your sorrows. If I see you calm and consoled, my own are redoubled. Everywhere I find unhappiness. Ah, how different it was from this, when you dwelt in the same places as I did. All was pleasure then. The certainty of seeing you embellished even the moments of absence. The time which had to be passed away from you glided away as it brought you nearer to me. The use I made of it was never unknown to you. If I fulfilled my duties, they rendered me more worthy of you. If I cultivated any talent, I hoped the more to please you. Even when the distractions of the world carried me far away from you, I was not parted from you. At the playhouse I sought to divine what would have pleased you. A concert reminded me of your talents and our sweet occupations. In company, on my walks, I seized upon the slightest resemblance. I compared you with all. Everywhere you had the advantage. Every moment of the day was marked by fresh homage, and every evening I brought the tribute of it to your feet. Nowadays, what remains to me? Dolorous regrets, eternal privations, and a faint hope that Valmont's silence may be broken, that yours shall be changed to inquietude. 10 leagues alone divide us, and that distance, so easy to traverse, becomes to me alone an insurmountable obstacle. And when I implore my friend, my mistress, to help me to overcome it, both remain cold and unmoved. Far from aiding me, they do not even reply. What has become then of the active friendship of Valmont? What, above all, has become of your tender sentiments, which made you so ingenious in discovering the means of our daily meetings? Sometimes, I remember, without ceasing to desire them, I found myself compelled to forego them for considerations, duties. What did you not say to me then? With how many pretexts did you not combat my reasons? And let me remind you, my Cecile, my reasons always gave way to your wishes. I do not make a merit of it. It has not even that of sacrifice. What you desired to obtain, I was burning to bestow. But now I ask in my turn, and what is the request? To see you for a moment, to renew to you and to receive a vow of eternal love. Does that no longer make your happiness as it makes mine? I thrust aside that despairing idea, which would set the crown upon my ills. You love me, you will always love me, I believe it, I am sure of it, I will never doubt it. But my situation is frightful, and I cannot endure it much longer. Adieu, Cecile. Paris, 18th of September,